that you have to meet all of the qualifications for that. And a large part of it is really to do with taxes, accounting, things like that.
I think divorces really is I mean, when I'm doing the mediation, we try to maximize, and so we work with people like yourself who try to maximize and make the pie as big as possible and do that. And I guess it's going to even get more complicated with all the new changes in the tax law. Where would you put in seeking the priorities here, and where would be the financial advice in the list of priorities in when you're seeking a divorce?
To me, it would be number 1 or number 2, because the counselor would be number 1, and I would put the financial person at number 2, unless there is any indication of violence or threatening in any way. Then you need to have an attorney in there to handle that situation. But other than that, I would go with the financial and the counseling first.
And what about the differences between the legal and financial realities of divorce? How would you describe that?
When you go to an attorney, you're looking for your rights. And most of the time that's why I don't like them to go to an attorney first, because the first thing you want to do is that knee-jerk reaction you talked about. You want revenge. You're after the emotional retribution that you can get in this situation. Whereas the financial end is looking at how are you going to live with this financial settlement afterwards. For instance, let's say someone has a business and the other spouse, normally if there's one family business involved, one person takes it over and the other one is bought out. So there's an instance where maybe they don't want the business. You take the business, you're the one involved with it. I don't want it, but there's no cash. Well, I'll take the truck. There's a good truck in there, I'll take that. Okay, so they take the truck. Everything looks fine, right? Not. No, it doesn't look right. Because you have taken something that's a business asset and you've made it an individual asset. You might have to recapture some taxes on that. And it's no longer business at all. So you've now put yourself in a taxable situation. So there's a lot of instances like that you would want to avoid. Now, a couple of days ago, I had a phone call. Someone went through their divorce, got the settlement. She has a job. He doesn't have a job. She just found out that they hadn't filed their taxes in 7 years. Who's going to take that? You know what the IRS is going to do?
What's the IRS going to do?
The IRS is going to go after both of them, but they're going to go with the one that has the money. So that's
what about my favorite IRS ruling about, I always love the term, innocent spouse?
You can file for innocent spouse, but in the meantime, you have to defend yourself. You have a lot of notices. You have a lot to deal with, and the IRS is going to come to you. It's just like your credit cards, your mortgage. You know how oftentimes those settlements... Go ahead.
No, as I said, did this lady come to you after the divorce or before?
After the divorce.
Okay, so I mean, if you had done this beforehand, you would have handled it very differently. What would you have done?
Well, that's one of the first things you do is bring in your last couple of years' tax returns. Let's take a look at what your assets are.
So that if you were using somebody like yourself, that you probably would catch some of those things in advance as opposed to being surprised later,
yes.
Which would be, we don't want those kind of surprises.
Well, you find in a lot of times in the settlements that the liabilities and assets are split up, and so this person takes this asset and this person takes some of the liabilities to try and offset. Everyone's trying to get, even. Well, that doesn't work that way, because if in a community property state, both parties are liable, and especially to the IRS. So I don't care what you write or what kind of settlement comes up, the IRS and your joint creditors, they don't have to abide by that at all. So you think you're in a good position, and you're not.
I'm going to ask you a question, then I'm going to go to the screen so you can see, so you can think about it, because another one of my surprise questions. It seems to me that a lot of attorneys will settle divorces based on what they perceive, will predict what the result, what a court would do. And other people sort of say try to empower the couple in terms of what they want to do, okay? Give it a little bit of thought to that. You're thinking about it, let me put on the screen where you can meet our guest. Don't understand the question?
No.
I'll repeat it again. I think in times of doing divorce, some attorneys will say that the result of the case, we're going to see this case based on what a court would order, try to predict in advance what a court would order, okay? And a lot of other people will do a case based on, they'll take all the data, which sounds more like what you do, and see what's in the best interest of the couple. Not necessarily what the court would do, but would do it that way. Do you have any thoughts? Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Or
Well,
am I
by
still
and
being
large,
confusing?
the court really doesn't want to deal with some of these issues that are coming. There was one couple that came, and they had most everything settled except for the silverware. Couldn't settle on the silverware. So they went to court. And the judge was like, "Are you kidding me?" So he said, "I'm taking a recess. When I come back, either you will have decided amongst yourselves, or this one's getting the knives and forks, and this one's getting the spoons."
Yeah, it's sort of dangerous. I've seen people get some funny results in that, where there'll be a place setting for 12 and each gets 6, which is sort of useless for both of them sometimes.
Right. Well, the thing is, you give up any control once you go to court. If you go through mediation like you do and work through the numbers in advance, you have the best chance of getting something you can live with later. If you go to court, it's out of your hands.
I think you've already mentioned some of the issues that couples ask you about. Are there any ones that we haven't discussed that you want to mention, or I think you've covered a lot of them?
Well, there are a lot of issues that you should look for, and a lot of hidden things or forgotten things that you should look for.
Give us some examples.
Timeshares,
Okay.
tax refunds, vacation pay, even frequent flyer miles. There are a lot of different things. And then after the divorce, when the divorce is over, you still have things you have to do. Because
Did you do that actually? I mean, I found a lot of couples get divorced and they're so relieved after the divorce is granted that they don't change the beneficiaries in their life
That's
insurance.
exactly right.
They don't do the changes on any of those things.
Titles,
and
car titles.
And 6 months later they come back or something happened. And unfortunately, I had a case once where somebody died and there were all sorts of complications from that. Is that your experience as well?
Yes. I had someone that came and they finished their divorce and they had an old vehicle sitting on the property and they didn't think anything of it. Who would want that old thing? Well, someone did, and they were in a position where with this economy they couldn't sell the house. So she wanted it. Of course, you know, they weren't getting along so well. So they couldn't agree on selling the vehicle because of the title. Nothing was done. It wasn't addressed. So there's so many little things.
Do you know that happened at all, or just was
There's
overlooked?
still, they didn't do anything with it. It was completely overlooked. They didn't see any value in it. Didn't deal with that divorce.
I had a mediation once.
Did you?
Where the couple came back to me 6 months later and said, "We forgot we owned $1 million house in Naples, Florida." So sometimes it's even bigger assets. And they fortunately went through mediation, so they were able to resolve it. But it's sort of become a standing joke with me that people can forget they own $1 million house. Well,
Yeah, that's kind of hard to forget.
yeah, they
for
can
me.
do that one. You talked a little bit about assets, but how do you define? I mean, a lot of people don't understand that. How do you define assets?
That is something that we run into often, because if you do go in and talk to someone about your financial situation, they'll ask you for a balance sheet. You want financial statements, and you know, at that moment, you know, emotionally you're glazed over anyway, so none of that really clicks. Assets really are what you own, something that has value or potential value. That's basically what it is. A liability is who you owe, and the equity is pretty much the difference.
Do you sort of distinguish at all between sort of emotional assets and financial assets? It seems to be sometimes people have, you know, family heirlooms or things like that that don't have a lot of value but also have that. How do you deal with that?
That's a tough one, because oftentimes they put a lot more value on emotional assets, and that oftentimes is where they have the biggest hang-up. And it can be something that doesn't have a lot of intrinsic value.
One of the things that I find comes up in most divorce cases that I handle, and it's really hard, and I'm not sure how you go about doing this, is that people are always afraid that people are hiding assets. That somehow, you know, he's got offshore accounts or she's, you know, has a secret account, and they're virtually paranoid on those kind of issues. How do you deal with hidden assets?
That is something that comes up often, especially in a business, where someone owns a business, because usually when a divorce is coming, one person knows that it's coming and the other one